All right, Zach, we're live. Hello, everyone. Let me pull up the stream
Hello.
notes.
Hi.
Sorry, we're running a little bit behind schedule here. Okay, so um, we don't actually have a whole lot of community updates. Everything's kind of stayed the same. It's more going to be project updates this week, and then we have some fun topics for you guys that were requested. Zach, what were you thinking for community updates?
But yeah, for community updates, I think the main thing was we just kind of redefined whatever we called internship before, and kind of named it better as to more what it is, and it's called an apprenticeship. So just I think that's the only notable community update.
Mhm.
Other than that, I think we had some project proposals that we need to look through, but
Yep. So as far as project proposals go, we have a brand new project called Economy Manager, and that's going to be an idle game framework made in Unity. For those of you unfamiliar with idle games, it would be games similar to Cookie Clicker or Hero Clickers. Basically, it's a game that you can play passively. And Stefano wants to make a game like that, so we brought it into Unity, and we're going to make an open source version of that. And then anybody can take with it and run and make their own idle game based off of that framework. Um, I have a video recording of the initial setup of the project that I'll upload to the YouTube probably later tonight. As far as the rest of the active projects go, for the oneleif website, we got a bunch of bug fixes in the work. The contact us view functionality is complete. We're currently blocked by some designs for finishing up version 1 of the website, which is just our static pages, but they will be done either this Sunday or the Sunday following, and then version 1 of the website will follow hopefully immediately after. For OL Go, Zach, you want to talk about that?
yep. I just got the new authentication in for sign up and register. So yeah, you were able to register and sign up, but after that you couldn't do anything because the authentication in the back end is using JWT. So got that in, and now can make or add posts, get all the posts from the dev API, and then we have someone joined on the project for the OL Go, and they've been working on the sign up view. Bronchosaurus, so that's his name. But yeah, thanks for jumping on. It looks great so far. I've been looking at it. He did it in Swift UI, and not Swift UI Kit. So I was gonna show him and have a side by side of the Swift UI and Swift UI Kit, and kind of have two separate versions. And I think it'd be good for an example, but then also practice with him. But he was adding in the register call and getting that actually to register back up. So that's all good. That's all for OL Go. I'm going to be making more tickets and kind of waiting for designs too.
As far as Bread for the Journey goes, our first meeting is this Sunday at 4 p.m. We'll be streaming that meeting, so feel free to attend. We'll also be in the streaming voice channel for everybody to chit chat as we're planning out that project. For community projects, Zach, so if you like it,
Yep, for the community projects, I just got in table view, and that was a cool little update. So that uses it makes it easy to map data models or structs with cells or UI table view cells, and put them and manage a table view really easily. So I have an example project up, and you'd see that in the SwiftUI kit channel if you look in there. And I have a table playgrounds where I'm kind of experimenting and that stuff. Other than that, there's a PR up right now to update the modifiers to allow for adding optionals for colors. But yeah, not too much. Doing a lot of experimenting. in ARC or automatic reference counting, kind of making sure that uh, or trying to find the best way to use these views in a competent way that they don't stick around in memory at all. Because Swift is a lot different on memory management. It does it by reference counting or strong reference or weak reference. So it might be easy to make stuff, but potentially if you make a ton of stuff and they're all strong references, well, that's never going to go away. So you could think of it as worse as bad or worse than a singleton, because at least a singleton there should be one of it. This reference like will always stay every time you go to a view and leave. It'll stay in the background. So kind of investigating that, trying to find the best way to have people, myself, and make it easier to write in a safe method.
For Bunny Hop, we had release 0.4.1, which fixed a ton of bugs. We did a massive planning rework and basically planned out all of the future versions until the final release. We started the Unity debug consoles so that you can kind of have like an open source debug console that you can import into your own game. And then for I already talked about it, but I wanted to give so I guess we didn't put it on the list. Never mind. I take it back. For Philodex, I can never remember how to pronounce it. The initial project is up thanks to Will, but he needs to configure it for the development deployment. For Leaf Down, he has an initial edit mode finished for generating Markdown and parsing it, and then he's working on the parsing of the headers and creating the parser itself. Well, the updates went pretty quick, so on to the fun topics. Um, Max had some questions on the following topics. So the first one that he wanted us to talk about was project management and how team-oriented stuff works when you're doing programming or development in general, and how beginners can learn these skills. So as far as I don't know, this is gonna be more of a discussion. Not we don't really have anything prepared for it. Um, I enjoy having these conversations free form at the end. So as far as project management goes, the majority of the knowledge that you'll want to know is just how to use like different project management tools like Trello, GitHub, or the Atlassian products like Jira and Confluence and Bitbucket. As far as the development side of things goes, you'll want to know how to use Git and any other version control systems that you're using. If you're doing like .NET, for example, you'd be using Azure DevOps. On the design side of things, you'll want to, you know what, I don't even want to speak on that, Suze.
Again, I would say a lot of places do use Jira. Otherwise, really for the most part, like Trello. And then for managing a design team, just being familiar with the design tool your designers are using. That way you can view the designs they're doing and understand kind of like that basic functionality.
And almost every company will have their own workflow for how these things work. So there really isn't any cut and paste method for you to be able to understand how any specific company is going to do it. Um, However, just understanding one of the tools will let you more easily transfer into how another tool will work, and you'll come to find that they all have similar functionality. There's just I don't know, maybe more settings in one tool versus another.
I think another thing for beginners with project management is learning at what um, agile, Kanban, those kind of methods of project management. Um, Learning and becoming familiar with them is super important to understand how working in the technology fields works, kind of in most cases. Um, Yeah, you have anything to say about that?
Well, there's different ways to plan out a project. Um, so there's multiple like aspects to project management. Planning it out, making all the tickets, putting it in your backlog and kind of understanding what needs to be done first. And then like there's project management of actually doing the work. And that's kind of what Susie said of agile practices or agile methodologies Scrum and Kanban are two very popular ones. Another kind of methodology, I don't know, I don't think it's agile, is waterfall. Um, and they're all different types of ways on how to manage those tickets and how to get the work done.
And a lot of you, if you're in college, you'll probably have a class about this. I know I did, and another member of oneleif briefly, we had a conversation about it where we both had agile classes. But if you haven't and you're not going to, or if you're not in school, or if you're starting from a different place, really learning about these methodologies is super. I would say it's important just to like know how it all like kind of functions and runs. Besides just like, all right, I know how to code, but do you know how to your like team structure is gonna work and stuff like that?
So on the stream right now, I have pulled up the project boards for Bunny Hop, which is a game that we're working on. You can see how I kind of have it sectioned off here. I have a board to keep track of all of my ideas, and then I have boards for each one of the versions of the game, right? So version 0.5 would be more for the debug console. 0.6 is going to be working on like tutorials and like general gameplay features. Um, I forget what 0.7 is. And then 0.8 would be integrating with Steam, right? And then I created a board for some designers that I got on the team so we can track their tickets. So if we go into one of them, the current one we're working on, for example, you can see we have a few columns, and every company does it different, but I have the majority of columns that a company would use. You have a backlog that says these are all the things that we need to get done, but they're not put into our priority list. If you're doing agile, you'll do things called sprints, which basically says I have this set period of time. It could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, it could be. I've had sprints as long as 2 months. Basically, they say they either promise their client, or if they're just a product and they don't have a client, they say every X length of an iteration, we're going to have these things done, right? So they'll put it in the backlog, and then during the sprint, they will put it in the to-do column or whatever they call it. And then as you are ready to take one of the tickets, you will basically put your name on it. So you can see my name is on this one. Um, and then what you'll do is, like, as a developer, when it's your turn to take the ticket, you'll grab it, you'll put it in progress, you'll start working on the code, and then when you're done with the code, you'll push it up to Git, you'll move it to in review. People will, give you feedback and whatnot. It'll be reviewed, and then you'll a lot of times at this point you will wait for like a QA team to review your code and make sure that all the tests pass and whatnot, and then usually the QA team will move it to done for you, or they'll move it back into in progress and say, hey, you need to get work done on it. Um, so that's just the basic process of how a project board works. A lot of times you'll have a project manager that will set up these boards for you, and they'll work with the client and say, hey, what are your requirements? And they'll take those requirements and they'll build out, like a systems level design for it, and then they'll break that down into individual tickets. When doing open source, you kind of have to, if you're running your own project or if you're on one of these small projects, you kind of have to learn to do these things on your own. And it is a skill of its own to kind of learn, how to break these things down into small, manageable chunks that, you know, people can actually accomplish. Anything to add to that, guys?
I'd just like to explain that what you were explaining before with sprints is Scrum specifically. You said agile. I mean, it is an agile, and I just want to clarify it isn't it. It is agile methodology, but that's specifically Scrum that does the sprints, 2 weeks and 3 weeks, and Kanban is more of a flow. So there are two different ways to do agile, but they do this pretty much the same kind of methodology of agile. It's really it's really advantageous to read into this and understand it, because once you get to a place, you kind of just get put into the flow, and understanding the flow and kind of the bigger picture of it really helps to understand your position in it.
And other things that would go into Scrum specifically, like their cycles. Like before sprint, you do like sprint planning, And then during the sprint, you'd have a daily scrum, or stand up, whatever you want to call it, that you'd meet daily and say, "Here's the ticket that I'm working on. Here's where I think I'll be at the end of the day." And then you tell them if you're blocked and you can't work, so that they can help you solve those issues. And then when the sprint's done, you'd go through the sprint review or a sprint retro and basically say, "Here's what went well during the sprint." Usually, this is led by like a product owner, or project manager, or a scrum master. Yeah.
So to try to generalize it, agile practice or agile methodologies they suggest to have a stand up, and scrum masters are specifically kind of for scrum. You can get certified as a scrum master. There's also terms called agile coach, which is more of a general term. Maybe they do a mix of scrum and kanban. But yeah, it's just understanding what agile is, and then understanding scrum, which Sabian is talking about and explaining, and kanban are two different things, but they're both agile.
I always kind of lumped them together because I never got like a clear delineation, but I don't like. I
I've
understand.
done them both.
Oh, okay.
I so my team started as Scrum. We did sprints every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We did reviews and everything. We did stand up, and then we switched to Kanban, and we still did stand up, and we still did everything except for, okay, we have to get this amount of work done in 2 weeks. We still had deadlines, of course, but we just worked on stuff. Like, we just prioritized our work. So I switched jobs recently, or not recently, I mean, I guess a year ago, but somewhat recently, to a sister company in my company, and they did sprints, and I convinced them and talked to them enough to switch to Kanban, and they've seen a difference too. So they are similar. They're very similar because they're both agile, but then they are very different because that's why they're different terms or different practices.
I feel like a lot of companies, at least that like I've worked from and stuff, they might not have that distinction. They might just be like, oh, we're agile or whatever. That's kind of just depending on what your company is like, what their culture is like.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought it as the thing of like, I guess at some point you could be agile, but then you have to pick like a specific agile. So I always thought it was, like, I don't I don't want to get too technical, but like, it's not a static, a solid type. It's, something that you inherit, and you inherit the properties of agile methodologies when you do Scrum or Kanban. I don't think waterfall is one, but so you wouldn't do, well, agile things if you're doing waterfall, and so that's where you can kind of see the bigger picture. But if you're doing Kanban, then you'll definitely see the difference versus Scrum. If you haven't done either one, I don't think you see the difference because there's no reason to. Uh, but yeah, I think the main thing when it comes down to it is just sprint or Scrum is all about sprints, and Kanban is all about the board and the flow. Like Scrum, you always want to get the sprint done. You have sprint review, and technically you failed it if you didn't 100% get your sprint done. So if you didn't get every ticket that you said you were going to get done, you've technically failed your sprint.
Which is sometimes pretty
Kanban's
hard to
more
plan
of,
for.
yeah, and Kanban's more of a what's our velocity and how can we improve that and how can we make our board more efficient and our team understand it. So there's two different understandings.
And I feel like with different clients, that one might work better than the other.
And not even different
Well,
clients. You
the
can have
main
this.
thing
Go ahead.
the main thing is I think Scrum works better when you're creating a product, and Kanban works better once you've gotten over the hump of creating it and you're more of looking for a flow of development. Because if you're just trying to work to get a certain amount of work every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and you don't really have to do it, like if it's just production support and feature enhancement or other things like that. But I don't think Kanban would be good starting a project, that would be weird because the whole thing is you don't know how long it takes a ticket to get through your Kanban board, and that's the whole thing about Kanban is that you can get projections and all this stuff. So yeah, it's tough to do product. It's like when you have a client and you have a deadline. I think Scrum is a lot more common.
But once you're more, yeah, like established, you see like Scrum as being potentially a better option for those companies that are more established or those projects that are more established versus like starting out. Is that what you're trying to say?
What?
You see Kanban as more.
Yeah, you switched it. Yes, I see Kanban as a better place to just manage tickets and features. And I don't know if we want to get into the discussion of Kanban versus Scrum, but Scrum doesn't really have swim lanes. I guess they do. They can, but they're not used as much. I don't want to get into it. It would be a better topic for another time.
I agree. I'd recommend just Googling each of the concepts and gathering what you can information about them. Or if you happen to have a class on it at school, take that class. So on to Max was kind of vague about the next part, but he said team-oriented stuff. I think there's a lot of topics we could talk about with inside of that. Um, I think the biggest thing is like trying to like if you're a new employee and you're coming onto a team, try and integrate onto that team as quick as possible. Meaning, soak up all the knowledge you can. Write down all of the everything that they tell you. Try and write it down as a note. So that way, you never have to ask them the same question twice because that's a really quick way to annoy senior level developers. Or so I've come to find. You could also, just generally be an easy to work with person, and that'll make your team um, more quickly want to become, more personal with you, which can make the team more fun. You can have inside jokes and whatnot, and it'll just make work more enjoyable. Anything you guys wanted to add to team-oriented stuff as a topic?
Um, I think just generally trying to have conversation and learn from the team too, not just kind of as work, but when you have a small amount of time, just talking to the team too, and that stuff.
What I would add to that is, um, don't expect to know everything right away when you're in a new team. Um, that when you're new, that is opportune time to be like, all right, I don't know anything. I'm just gonna listen and learn, and it's totally fine to not know something. This is the best time to like ask a ton of questions, and like the other two have said, like, take notes, and just accept that you just don't know stuff, and be comfortable with that for at least at the start. And also just really respect your other team members and what they bring to the table, even if they might not seem like very more like they might not seem like they're more advanced than you or something, or it's like, oh, I know more than this person. Well, not definitely not right now because you're new. So yeah, be very humble when you're starting with a new group.
We had a guy at my work that got hired on at the similar time as me and ruffled quite a few feathers for assuming he knew how things worked. So I'd have to agree with Susie there. Okay, so career advice for non-technical people for a career switch. Zach and I have talked to a lot of people that have wanted to do career switches. Um, and there's really two main paths you can go down, right? You can either go get the degree, or you can do self-taught. If you go get the degree, there's not a whole lot to tell you other than to pick a college that suits your needs. But if you're going to go down the self-learning path, the biggest thing that you could do is personal projects and open source and team based projects so that you can get the feel for the team environment. So that way you're not going in blind to working on a team because it'll almost be somewhat of a culture shock. Those are the big points that I have to talk about on that.
I feel like just joining One Leaf, you're already doing like one of the best things you can do, right? A learning community. Joining a learning community is definitely a great first step into switching to a technical career when you're not currently in one.
Yeah, I've noticed the imposter syndrome, that being, for those that don't know what it means, it's just, when you're starting something new, you feel like you're not good enough. I've noticed that much more commonly in people that have kept themselves siloed and working on their own. Um, and when you first start working in teams, for example, when you join One Leaf from your, I've had several people reach out to me and say, I don't feel like I belong. I feel like so many people know more than I do, and almost everyone tells me that, which is funny because everybody thinks they're not good enough. But just don't compare yourself to other people because some people are going to learn quicker than you. Some people are going to be better at learning from, you know, books than videos and whatnot. Don't really compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to yourself, yesterday and where you're going to be tomorrow. And that's the best thing you can do to improve yourself. Because as long as you're better today than you were yesterday, you'll catch up and be just fine.
Yeah, that's pretty much what any member of One Leaf should be looking for is to, grow as a community. So, if you look and you feel like everyone's ahead of you, think of that as a good thing because then that's how many people you can learn from and how many people want to help you improve. Because no one wants you to just join One Leaf and, talk down to you. We all want you to jump on our projects. We want to jump on your project. We want to answer your questions and share resources. So it's an open community and it's meant to be um, accepting, but it is big and intimidating to join. See a lot of people, so I understand where people are coming from.
I also think it's just more fun to not only learn things together, but be able to work on things together. Because, like, if you find some article that inspires you and gets you excited, and other people happen to have the same interest, it's way more fun to be able to share that with someone. Um, for example, like, if you're, I don't know, if you're living with a fiance or something and they have like no interest in tech at all, it could be, um, how do I put this? It could be almost frustrating that you couldn't share things that you're excited about with them. But that's one of the nice parts about having a community like One Leaf is, people can get excited about things with you. I think, I think keeping that excitement is like one of the most important things that you could do because it keeps you focused. I guess is the right way to put it. It keeps you always
Yeah,
getting things done.
yeah, and Sabian and I can both speak to it. It's really exciting to have a project that we like to work on by ourselves, and we will work on by ourselves, but then also for other people to join on and check it out and even work on stuff and contribute. I get excited about the work that I do on my projects, but then to, wake up or to look on GitHub and see someone submitted a PR and it's stuff that I wanted, done and someone else is excited about it, it's just a feeling a lot better than myself doing all the work. It's sharing it and also kind of sharing it and the excitement and the growth as a community. What do you think about that developing the bunny hop game, Sabian?
Well, actually, I wanted to kind of go off on a different road. When Zach and I first started developing together, he was more interested in iOS, and I wasn't 100% interested in it. But it was more fun to work on an iOS project with somebody than to work on a game by myself. Because Zach and I could bounce ideas off each other for apps, and just have these like brainstorming sessions that were so fun and inspiring. That it would make me get more work done on an iOS app, even though my interests were lower in it than working on a game. And I think that speaks volumes.
Time to come back and make iOS apps.
I have people that
No
work on
map
games now, though.
3. There you go.
But yeah, you mentioned it there with Notemap 3. Zach and I worked on an iOS app called Notemap that basically allowed you to like take maps and like on like a literal map almost. Um, And like we wouldn't have come up with that idea if we weren't like bouncing ideas back and forth. So not only like do you get inspired, but you also get to come up with things that you wouldn't have previously. I don't feel like I have to tell anybody the benefits of working with people. I feel like people just enjoy it for the most part.
Yep. But working with people and acting like you don't know anything, or I mean, us acting like we don't know anything or trying to think like that, it's really intimidating, and you might not think people want to join on to your project. You might think your project's simple, but those are the fun projects. The fun projects are the simple projects that everyone can understand, everyone can jump on easy, and everyone can help contribute. And it's just how much work needs to be done on it. It's always the variable, but
I
When
had
we've been working in silo for a while, I can see, and I know because I have worked in silo a lot. It can be intimidating to talk to other um designers, or I guess if you're a developer, other developers. Because you're like used to you, used to what you know, and it can be intimidating. Like, oh, they know more than me, they're gonna judge me. But in a community like One Leaf, or honestly at your work, or they're not judging you. We all started from somewhere. No one comes out of the no one comes out of the womb designing and developing crazy like a crazy person. No, that's not true. Um, so yes, it can be intimidating, it can be scary, but um, you can learn a lot from others, and you just gotta believe that you can, and feel free to bug or not bug, but feel free to message any of us um, and ask us for help or advice or whatever. That's what we're all here for.
I feel like I would almost prefer working with someone that doesn't know much and knows that versus working with someone that knows, enough to get the job done, but assumes they know everything. Because those people are just easier to work with and more enjoyable to work with. Also, so as far as the career switch goes, if you're thinking about switching careers to something technical, reach out to Zach, Susie, or I, or one of the members of One Leaf, and just ask, what you can do to start learning. Um, Zach and I love mentoring and giving out roadmaps to get to your specific goals. There isn't really a one size fits all strategy, sadly. So we can help you come up with a roadmap that fits your exact needs.
yeah, and just understanding kind of what platform or what stack you want to develop towards, like if it's mobile, web, if it's game, if it's you want to do something with a specific language. If you know any of those, it really helps us kind of uh, aim you in the right direction.
Or if you don't know, we can help you know. Or send you off in a bunch of random directions until you figure it out.
Yeah, I think definitely for career advice, starting to get those projects and getting them open source. Because like talking to recruiters or applying for a job, it's easier to just tell someone like, "Hey, I have some number of projects on GitHub, and that's where I've been learning whatever I want, iOS if it is or Android games." And then at least that's some place that you're putting up your stuff where someone can look at it. Another thing would be if you've released any like production stuff, if you have a website up, if you have any apps released, if you have a game on Steam or anything, like those are the two things that you really want to speak about. Other than that would be education, or if you could take a class on it or a course on it, if you could get certified in it. But the main two would be getting a project up on GitHub or a few, and letting it be public domain or in the public domain and letting people see it. And then also, I forgot my second point. No. GitHub, and then also production. If you can get a website up, or if you can get an app released or a game released, that's really what the people are looking for, I guess. That's what I found, or got the most friction during interview, was saying, oh, I have some apps in production, or I've released this many, or anything like that. Working on projects, especially in a team, especially in a group, is something to really help your resume, and also good for career switching.
So I want to talk on both of those points actually, because I agree that those are the two main ones. Having something in production just means having it released, right? So if you're working on a website, being able for somebody to go to www.whateveryourwebsite.com is and be able to see your work is huge to show that you've actually released the product. When I was looking at game development jobs, the mass majority, when I talked to the recruiters or the hiring managers, wouldn't even take me into an interview if I hadn't had a game, published. Because not only like does it show that I went to the extra step to finish it, but like there's a lot of challenges that come up when you're trying to publish a game and learning how to market it and whatnot, and they want to see those things. Um, yeah, so that's my point on the taking something to production. As far as open source and GitHub projects go, I've talked to every hiring manager or every manager that's hired me on. After the fact that after them hire man, my English right now. After they've hired me on, I asked them, what made you guys want to choose me over, in almost every job I've ever went for, there was a more qualified candidate. And more often than not, almost every single time, their response was, your projects had nothing to do with what we do, right? For example, at my current job, I'm doing .NET development, and all of my projects that I was excited about were in Unity, which is somewhat similar, right? Because it uses C Sharp, but like I didn't learn any of the .NET tools or anything like that. What they liked to see is my passion and my capability to learn. So your projects don't have to be in even in a language that you're going to use at whatever job you're applying for. If you can show that hiring manager that you're passionate and love to learn, that job is going to be hands down yours as long as you're a person that's fun to work with.
Yep. A big question. If they ask you it, it might not seem like a big question, but hopefully they do. Is what are you working on in your free time? Or, tell me some of your projects or that stuff. That's a really important question that they're asking because um, if you just say, "Oh, I've worked on a few school projects," or "Oh, I've worked, kind of with the language and tried to understand the syntax, but nothing much," versus if you passionately speak about a few projects that you've worked on, even albeit small, if you talk about them and in a way that you're confident, you can actually discuss it with another person that could be potentially interested in your project, then that is also something that speaks volumes to the interviewer, to you.
Also, if they don't ask that question, shove that answer in somewhere. Like I went to a couple interviews and they asked me, asked me a bunch of questions, and then on the last one, they were like, "Okay, this is the last question." I was like, "Shit, I need to like tell them about my personal projects because that's like, where all of my experience is coming from." So they asked like, I don't know, what made you become a developer? And I'd find some way to shoehorn in all those projects that I was passionate about because even if they don't ask those questions, that's what they need to know about.
Yeah, and it's really just, I mean, trying to find the conversation and really just talking that much to get to that point if they don't give it to you.
And you can, more often than not, you can almost lead the conversation any way you want. If you just start by just, rather than just answering the interview questions, if you have a good conversation with them, you can kind of lead them. I don't want to say lead them where you want, but I don't know. You can just have a good, enjoyable conversation, and they will want to ask you more questions and learn more because you're fun to talk to. Like talk to them as though they're a good friend or they're a coworker that you enjoy talking to, and they will be much more responsive.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. If you can passionately talk about your project, if you can talk about something related to the job, if you can talk about the language or whatever framework you're going to be using. Let's say you're using React, and some new stuff just came out with React. Talking about that and being up to date with it is really beneficial. Because I've had multiple interviews where I've just one-on-one to developer, just had an interesting conversation. Um, the interviewees or saying that interviewers can test you in a coding interview or just talk to you. And I've had multiple coding interviews talk. Then I guess past that, but everyone's like Susie wants to talk.
Sorry. So I'm a person who's been on a lot of interviews in their lifetime. Um, why is that? Because I had a tough time finding a design job right away out of college. So my best interviews and the ones that I got the job, whatever,
Hey, Suze,
were the ones where it's
time
super.
out. You're
What?
you're cutting out really bad. Let's both reconnect to the voice channel. There you go. Try talking.
How's that?
Better. Thank you.
All right. So, my best interviews that I've had where I've gotten the job, they've all been very conversational. And they haven't started out with like says something, I say something, and it's very dry. It's been more they say something and I kind of joke about something, or I mention, the weather, or like just something like kind of, maybe not totally related, but like just making both parties comfortable is gonna make your interview go better, no matter what. And it can be scary to have those design challenge portions. But honestly, if you can, this is kind of off topic of what I was saying, that's fine. If you can justify what you did for that challenge and, any sort of justification and questions are better than nothing. So, yeah, that's how to ace a design interview 101, I guess. But really, conversation is so key.
Also, speaking of questions, um, you should be asking a lot of questions at the interview, right? And not only because you should want to know as much as you can about the company before you work there, because you want to know if you want to work there. Um, you asking questions about their company or even about the person itself shows that you're interested. And when you go to a technical interview, they're really interviewing you on two things: your technical skills and your capability to work on their team specifically, right? They're looking for a culture fit. If you're interested in people and capable of talking to them well, you're gonna you're gonna pass that culture fit test, right? And then you just have to show off your technical skills. And if you have projects, like we talked about before, you're gonna pass both with flying colors. Actually, and on the One Leaf channel, we had a whole interview with Hastings College that we posted on the YouTube channel about talking about how to interview and whatnot. So feel free to go watch that video. It's probably like an hour and a half long.
Wayne State.
Yeah, Wayne State. Sorry. Wow.
Hastings coming soon.
Yeah. I don't know why I was thinking Hastings. It was Western Nebraska.
All right, so next topic, unless you have anything else on career advice for non-technical people.
I could talk about it all day, man. We can move on.
Nonprofit funding sources.
This is a weird
Start to
topic to
journey.
topic. Yeah. This.
I'd say that's the only one we've gotten.
Yeah. So there's a few places nonprofits can get funding, right? The most obvious one would be a grant of some sort. So you can either get grants from other organizations or from the government or an individual. Um, and really, what you're looking for is you want your goals to align with their goals, so they know that their money is going to the right spot. So let's take, for example, I don't know, a nonprofit that is trying to help the homeless. And you know that there's a billionaire that used to be homeless, and he has a foundation for helping nonprofits. And your goals are going to align there, right? And all you have to do during that present is set up some sort of presentation, contact their marketing team or whatever, and get those goals across. And then once you have the initial funding, so okay, so there's like two steps, right? There's getting the initial funding, right, which is broken into a few other steps, like finding the audience that you can talk to, finding their goals, and then figuring out how much money you can even ask for. And then after that, it's like recurring revenue, right? So like once that person has donated to you, it's showing them where their money has gone, how it's made a difference, and making them feel like their money made a difference, so that way they're happy enough to want to fund you even more. But outside of that, like nonprofits can still make money, right? And I feel like this is a really big misconception that people have, is that nonprofits can't they can't have any income, right? It just has to be like donation based. While lots of nonprofit organizations are entirely donation based, that's not necessarily the case for all. Um, let's take for example an idea that we had for OneLeaf, right? Is we're training lots of people to become developers. So an idea that we had to be able to get funding for OneLeaf is to bring in recruiters, and if they find a OneLeaf candidate that they like, we'd get like a finder's fee because they'd give that out anyways, right? Like the majority of recruiting companies will say, hey, do you have a friend that is interested in a job like this? Cool, we'll give you X amount of money because this role is worth that much. Um, so that would be something more for our use case that would be somewhat of a recurring revenue. But that's not steady enough unless we're training thousands of people, right? Um, Beyond that, I guess you have to somewhat figure out why you even need the money, right? Um, because there's lots of nonprofits that throw away their money, right? Um, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but the one that comes to mind would be the Susan G. Komen, the cancer one. Like 90 some percent. I don't even want to put numbers out there because I can't remember them off the top of my head. But a large portion of their money goes to two things. One is paying their employees, and two is marketing. Um, and their thing is we're not paying for any research or anything. We're trying to get the word out about cancer, which doesn't necessarily make sense to me. But they have their formula down, right? They pull on your heartstrings to want to invest, and you feel like your money is going places without them even showing that it is making any difference. um, I think that's more on the unethical side of doing things, but I I wanted to bring it up so that that it is a way that things are done, not necessarily that it's a way things should be done. Um, I got a bunch more ideas, but I've been talking for a while. What input do you guys have?
Linux.
Yeah, that's a great example. Go for it.
Oh no, I was just gonna say Linux or Ubuntu. I think Ubuntu's nonprofit organization, right?
I don't
And
know.
then
Basically, their money making scheme is that the Linux operating system or Ubuntu or whichever one we're talking about, the operating system itself is free, right? But if it's working in an enterprise environment like a big company, right? Then they're going to want some sort of support. If something goes wrong and I don't know, some random thing on the Linux kernel goes wrong while you're running a server and it's crashing and you don't want to put thousands of hours into it, they have like services that the nonprofit offer, right? Which is fair, right? Like the company. So I guess the point that we're trying to make here is the company can't have like a stock. The company can't profit, but it can pay its employees and it can still bring in income, right? Which is also a common misconception with open source that we've brought up before, is that just because something's open source doesn't mean it can't make money. Linux is open source, but the services that a company may offer to support a Linux operating system, can be charged because somebody's putting labor into that.
yep. And looking right online, the Linux Foundation is a nonprofit and was founded in 2000 and has about 150 employees. So those are people paid to actively work on it under the nonprofit.
And I'm sure a large portion of the funding goes to like software development, um, and or to at least like leading the project software development. So that way, if there's thousands of requests coming in for these things should change, then you have to look through those and identify which ones should change. A large portion of their um, costs probably go to marketing as well, so people are aware. Okay, maybe not Linux, for example, because everybody knows about Linux. Um, but marketing is still a big thing if you're a smaller nonprofit to at least get the word out that you exist, right? Um, yeah, and you can get really creative with funding for nonprofits because um, you're trying to do a good thing, right? So you don't have to go through normal avenues of funding. Um, so if you run a nonprofit, I'd highly encourage you to think outside the box on who would be willing to give you donations. It could even be a company that you know wants a sponsorship, for example. If your goals align, like I don't know, uh, you're a nonprofit that I was trying to think of an example of why like Coca-Cola would want to sponsor you. I don't know. They love to advertise. I don't know. Anything else, guys?
I don't think so.
That's
Do we
kind of
have
all I
any
got.
questions?
Nah, Cody's just agreeing with us over here.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Well, we made it. We made it to the hour mark. Unless you guys have anything else, we can call here. I'll wait a couple seconds for the stream to catch up.
Let's let the stream catch up, but I think we're good. I
Yeah,
don't
me
have
too.
anything else.
Okay. I will go ahead and call it here. If people want more like a, I think it would be really cool to do kind of like a either mock interviews over stream or people just being able to ask career advice over stream. Maybe we should set up more of an event for that for people to come ask questions because I think a lot of people would be interested in that. I feel like a lot of the information that we said here is useful, but it may have gotten drowned out by like the project updates at the beginning and whatnot. So I'm gonna write that down as an idea for us to do in the future.
I think I put this in direction a while ago, but some sort of like Q&A with all three of us, just like of the roots, and we gather a ton of questions that people have. That might be an interesting video
I agree.
or stream.
Let's let's put that in the announcements this week or next week. Sorry, and see if we can't get that set up. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming to the stream. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned a lot.
Yep.
Have a good
See
night.
ya.